Welcome back to the Two Mods podcast presented by Sheena Boychuk Real Estate. I'm your host, Joshua Marshall. I got my co-host with me, Phil Stockley. Phil, how's it going?
Doing pretty good today, bud.
Yes, that's good, buddy. That's good. Yeah, no, it's pretty good over here. Busy time for us. A lot going on. Blue Jays baseball and playoffs for that, and MLB. NHL's slowly getting going here.
Yeah.
Another week
One
left.
day closer to opening night, eh?
Pretty much, yes. We're getting there. We're getting there for sure. So nothing that like I'm just excited, man. It's crazy. There's so much going on, but yeah, nothing to complain about at all. There's a lot going down and a lot of great going down too. So it's a lot of our guests that we've had throughout the year are getting ready to get that NHL season, and some are in the AHL, and some are even in the junior ranks too. And that's pretty sweet in its own. But how are things with you? How are the boys? They're getting fired up too, aren't they?
Yeah, we got our first exhibition game for the U11s. They're gonna play Camrose this weekend, so that should be good. They had their first practice with their new teams last night, and they got kind of ran through the paces. I was telling the head coach there on my older boy's team, he looked like torts. He had kids laying on the ice. They were exhausted. So it's
Body
good. Get them into shape. And yeah, exactly.
the body bags are laying down just like they were in Philadelphia last year. But it'll be interesting to see what the Flyers do. But more interesting to see what the Washington Capitals do, because we got a very special guest with us this evening, don't we, Phil?
Yeah. Speaking of coaches, we have he is the reigning AHL coach of the year. He also won it the year before that with the Calgary's farm team. Mitch Love is joining us tonight.
Yeah, no, very excited, and looking forward to hearing from him, and hearing from what people think about this interview, because his road to the NHL is a great one, and it's an interesting one, and I think everyone's going to get to listen to that as they get going here. But I'm excited to just to get that going for sure. This is a guy I've kind of watched throughout. We're the same age, so kind of it was pretty cool to kind of see him grow up and get an opportunity, and a lot of people that I know that have played with him. So as everyone will hear throughout the interview, but it's pretty exciting, and obviously Matthew Phillips is a big fan of him too, isn't he?
Yeah, and just on another like side note, like you were just saying, like how young this guy is and how bright his future probably is as a head coach. Like he's got such a long career ahead of him.
Yeah.
And so yeah, kind of cool to get in here in his early days in the NHL and see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. So everyone is tuned in to listen to our interview with Mitch Love, and we're going to get to that interview right now. So let's get to our interview with Mitch Love of the Washington Capitals.
Mutts fans, our next guest played parts of 6 seasons in the WHL with Moose Jaw, Swift Current, and Everett. 5 seasons in the AHL where he played 278 games and accumulated over 800 penalty minutes. He then transitioned into coaching role back with Everett for 7 years. In 2018, got the head coaching gig with the Saskatoon Blades. In 2020, won gold as an assistant coach for Team Canada at the World Juniors. In the summer of 2021, would accept the head coaching role with the Calgary Flames farm team, the Stockton Heat, and then the following season with the Calgary Wranglers, where he would win the AHL Coach of the Year in both of those seasons. This season, he takes his talents to the NHL. Please welcome to the podcast, assistant coach from the Washington Capitals, Mitch Love. Mitch, how's it going?
It's good, Phil. Yeah, thanks for having me. Great introduction there, and it's good to be chatting some hockey here with you and Josh tonight.
Yeah, so I'm gonna start off with last night. We had Matthew Phillips on our podcast this summer, and he's a great kid, and you've got to kind of bring him along here. Big overtime win last night, and great goal for him. What was your perspective on that?
I mean, obviously, my relationship with Matt over the last couple of years has been a real strong one. He's been, arguably probably outside of Dustin Wolf, our MVP on our team in Stockton and in Calgary last year. So, the things that he does on a day-to-day basis as a player and a teammate off the ice, I'm never really that surprised by. It's funny story. We're going into overtime last night, and there's on the bench Kirk Muller, who you guys are familiar with. Spencer, who's running the bench, obviously, and Scotty Allen, who's a longtime coach. He stands between myself and Spencer, and so I'm working with the D, and I kind of cruise by Spencer as we cross over and switch sides heading into overtime, and I just said, hey, these are the 3D I plan on using. Yeah, all good. And then Scotty Allen comes to me, goes, hey, is Phillips, can he play in overtime? And I'm like, yeah, no, he can play in overtime. I've used him a time or two before. And kind of as a few rotations went on, and we had a pretty good showing in overtime last night against Boston. Really possessed the puck well. I pop out there and about a minute and a half left. You see Matthew out there, and then obviously to get the game winners is a pretty cool moment for him and his family. And he's had a heck of a camp to this point, and he's really making a case for himself here to start the season in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome to see, especially for a kid who he's really pushing for a spot on that NHL team. And we kind of said it like when he was here, like we in Calgary, we were really disappointed to let him go, but to see him go, but at the same time, we're kind of rooting for him too, because of his situation. And but we can get back to Matthew Phillips a little later. I'm gonna toss it over here to Bosco. He's gonna start with you with minor hockey. So
Mitch, how's it going? So hopefully everything's going good, and I'm super excited to kind of interview you. We're the same age here, so we're both 39. Yep. We're 84 born. So I never got to the level that you got to, but I had a few friends, and as we're kind of saying before we recorded, grew up with Johnny, went to school with him, and grew up with him in the north side of Edmonton here, and just kind of where did it all start for you? I know it says on Hockey DB you're from Quesnel, British Columbia. Is that kind of where you played in your minor hockey, and everything kind of started there for you?
Yeah, I grew up there, and like any youngster on the Blades pretty early, and grew up with my minor hockey days right up to my completion of my first year Bantam. And left Quesnel and went to Wilcox, Saskatchewan, and actually played at Notre Dame College there for a year, and at 15, so it was my second year Bantam. I think coming from a small town in British Columbia, which had a junior B team a lot of the years I grew up there, turned to the junior A program, the Quesnel Millionaires, but all during that time. For me in hockey growing up, the Prince George Cougars moved from Victoria to Prince George. So there was a few other options between Western Hockey League and Junior A. And as I kind of went through it and got a little more serious about the game itself, obviously making the move as a 15-year-old to Saskatchewan, living in a dorm and doing all that stuff. The choices you had as a player between Junior A and Western Hockey League, it's probably a little more prevalent now in terms of the options and whatnot for young players. But that time, I kind of, when the Prince George Cougars moved to Prince George, I was really intrigued by that. I was intrigued by the new building. I was intrigued by 5,000 fans a night, every night, watching that team when they first got there. And I always told my dad, I was like, hey, this is the league I want to play in. If I'm fortunate enough and I'm good enough to play in it, this is the league I want to play in. And, ended up bouncing around in the Western Hockey League for 5 years, and then on to pro, and then in coaching.
Nice. So talk about, like, was the transition, from, junior rank, like getting into the junior ranks, was that a hard one, and how that process was of getting, going to Moose Jaw to start off and kind of being further away from home? Like, how did that process go, and how did you like your time in the WHL for the first couple of years that you were there in Moose Jaw?
Yeah, it was good. Like, just to take a step back a little bit, like I was never drafted. I personally felt, and this is just me, I'm a competitor, and really want to do well at whatever I'm doing. And I wasn't drafted in the Bantam draft, so that was kind of a shot to me. Again, I was from a small rural town where there wasn't a lot of attention. We didn't go to big tournaments like the lower mainland of BC, so it was tough to get showcased. But that was part and parcel. The move for me to go to Wilcox was just the attention, the tournaments we would go to, the coaching, living a dorm life, and growing up maybe a little bit quicker than another 15-year-old that I grew up in my hometown with. So I ended up taking a free agent invite to Moose Jaw. Went there. There was actually, back in the day, it wasn't email. It was a letter, as you probably remember, Josh.
Yeah.
It was a letter in your mail, and you're racing to that mailbox every day to see what team had sent you an invite to their camp or whatever. So Moose Jaw actually was the first team that hit my mailbox. And so, I had probably 10 other WHL teams to token, hey, come to camp, come to our rookie camp and see what happens. So I was loyal to that first piece of mail from Moose Jaw. Went there, had a good camp, ended up getting listed with the Warriors, and then went to Notre Dame for my second year Bantam.
Yeah.
And went through that there and had a good season. That year we had the first and second overall Bantam picks, which was Braden Coburn, who we all know, and Stephen Meyer were the first two picks in the Bantam draft. And obviously those guys went on to have some NHL careers themselves. And then I ended up playing a game at 15 with Moose Jaw. They needed a call up one night. The bus swooped through Wilcox, Saskatchewan, pretty surreal moment, and picked me up, and we ended up in Regina or in Brandon that night playing. So, my first couple of years of Moose Jaw was great. We had great veteran players that really helped me to learn the league, what it took to be a young player in the Western Hockey League, and obviously just tried to continue to evolve myself as I got an older player, and did the same thing for the younger players coming through.
Yeah. It's quite the, being away from home is tough in any which way. And then but you having that solid kind of foundation of a family and the support. Can you kind of talk about, the support you got from your parents and family members, and all that, of like how that process was, and in any times that they did come out to kind of watch you play too, how special that was?
Yeah, it's to be honest with you, this was my dad's idea. Like, he came home one day with the old VHS and slapped it in at dinner time and was like, hey, I want you to see this school. And, we're not by any means pushing you out the door to go play hockey in Saskatchewan, in a small town, but, we think this might be a good option for you to grow as a hockey player and also grow as a person. And, so I was very thankful and grateful for that opportunity. I mean, back in the day, and the costs to go to a private school to play hockey were tremendous. Not quite like they are nowadays, from what I hear, but
yeah,
it's a pretty penny, and so that was a sacrifice my family made for me, and they were very supportive. I mean, they'd come to different events. You get home at Christmas time and whatnot as a youngster, and we'd always race. I'd talk to them a couple times a week on a payphone down at the end of the dorm room. You're kind of waiting for a phone because somebody's using it, talking to a family member in Japan, or whatever the case might be with the students that went to Notre Dame. And but I'm very appreciative of my family and the support they've given me, as a player, as a coach. They're people I dearly love and care about, and I know they're proud of me, and that means a lot to me.
Yeah, no, that's good. It's nice to kind of get that support. I was connecting yesterday with Johnny's wife there. She's one of our sponsors on our podcast here, and just going over, just ideas and suggestions and like what it's all about, and not forgetting kind of who's around you to support you, and, the importance of, being true to kind of the people that have been there for you your whole entire life, and, and always kind of supporting you. So obviously you start Moose Jaw, then you go over to Swift Current. Talk about your time with the Broncos before you kind of Everett was, you finished off in Everett there.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit of a shock move for me when I was 17.
Did you
at the end of my 60, pardon me?
Did you get traded? Is that kind of how that worked? Yeah.
Yeah, I got traded at 17. Now, the end of my 16-year-old season in Moose Jaw, there was a coaching change late in the year. Len Nielsen was relieved of his duties as our head coach, and they brought in Curtis Hunt and Lane Lambert. And anytime there's a coaching change, there's going to be changes in personnel, and I think for me at that time, I maybe wasn't the right fit for them at 17, and So we ended up making a 1-for-1 swap with the Moose Jaw, or with Swift Current Broncos. I was traded for 18-year-old Jared Barassa, Saskatchewan kid. And, it was probably a move that benefited both of us. We both got a fresh start. I got an opportunity right away to play with Ian White, who at the time at 17, 18 years old was one of the best defensemen in junior hockey. Guy who could really bomb the puck, and I believe two seasons over 20 goals as a young defenseman in major junior hockey in that area. As an undersized guy, was hard. World junior defenseman, and obviously went on to have a really good NHL career for himself. So I was fortunate, played a lot of minutes, and then as I went through my 17-year-old year and into my 18-year-old year, I knew it was kind of, for me, if I wanted to get noticed and again wanted to try to make a step to pro hockey or get drafted in the National Hockey League, I was going to have to do something. I wasn't a very skilled player. I didn't put up a lot of points. I like to play a rough and tumble game, stick up for my teammates, and decided to fight a lot that year. I believe I had over 40 fights as an 18-year-old. And in the era of that time, as you know, Josh, like that, guys were getting drafted for having 300 penalty minutes.
They were.
Whether it was a 6th, 7th round pick. So I felt like, okay, that's my ticket to get drafted. And then from there, that's what you make the most of it in your pro career, trying to earn a contracts next. But didn't happen. So, it was, and that was the end of the story. I ended up getting traded at the expansion draft whenever it came into the Western Hockey League 20 years ago. And that for me was a huge move in my career, not just as a player, but as a coach now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I don't know if you remember this name, Doug Ockenberg, if you would have played against him at all. He's coaching here in Edmonton, and I grew up with him, and him and I were talking about you, because he did say he played against you and whatnot. But one of the things that kind of was a turning point in his career was when he got traded, and he didn't think he was ever going to get traded. He thought that's the organization he was with. He was going to play there for the rest of his career. When he got traded, it kind of played some mind games with him, because it's like, well, okay, what do you mean? Like, I'm doing everything I possibly can for the organization I'm with, and then now you trade me, and I feel like I'm one of the top players, one of the leaders, and it kind of plays a bit of a mental game with you. But at the end of the day, it makes you the person you are today, because you did go through some adversity in that situation. So obviously, like, your road to where you're at now is, I think it's a special one, and you've always been positive, and anyone that's hearing this now is just, if it's press play, it's just keep moving forward. The opportunity is going to come. So when you were finished up in the WHL, how did it kind of go for you and with the American Hockey League? Was, was your agent and your family kind of seeking out some deals, or did you get some invites through tryouts? And it's, anyone looks at your hockey DB, almost every year you're in a new city. So I'm assuming that must have been somewhat tough too, but you're making the best of the situation that you had in front of you.
Yeah, it's I don't tell this story often, just because I don't really talk about my career as a player, because I was a very average hockey player and whatnot. But I finished on my overage year in Everett. I spent my off seasons in Everett when I was playing there, training and whatnot. At that time I was kind of contemplating, okay, do I go to school? Utilize my free education from the Western Hockey League. At the time, I kind of wanted to be a police officer. And then I had a few East Coast League offers, on different teams. San Diego Gulls were a team, and Alaska Aces at the time were two teams that were heavily trying to, recruit me to go play in their program. And so, I ended up making a choice. I signed a free agent deal with San Diego Gulls. We're in the East Coast Hockey League, and it was an opportunity for me to have a rookie camp invite to Anaheim. That was their affiliation at the time, still is now. And so I'll be honest with you, I wasn't in great shape that off season. I was a big guy. I was over 205 pounds. I wasn't in great shape. That was on me as an athlete. I kind of knew I had a little bit of runway in terms of my off season still to go play in the East Coast Hockey League, because they have a later start. and so I had some time, and then I got a call one day from my agent, Ross Gurney at the time out of Vancouver, and he says, "Hey man, Colorado Avalanche got some heavy interest in you, bringing you to training camp." And I'm like, "Well, I thought I was going to Anaheim's camp." He's like, "No, scrap that deal. We're going here." I'm like, "Okay." So I ended up fast forward a month, end up going to Colorado's camp. So now I'm in a bit of a panic in terms of getting prepared and getting in better shape and going to face altitude in an NHL camp there. And I remember I was so out of shape. I was, again, big guy, altitude, trying to keep up with Joe Sakic and Milan Hajduk and Adam Foote and all these guys, the heavy hitters of the Avalanche at that time. And I remember we were doing a conditioning drill one day, and I ended up seizing up. I couldn't finish the conditioning drill at practice. It was embarrassing. I ended up going to the training room. They pumped me with IV. I got veteran guys walking in there, like almost laughing at me, which as they should be, because it was embarrassing.
Yeah.
And so it for me, that was a bit of an eye-opening experience of just how much you have to put into the game of hockey. And I think it's evolved itself now in terms of what these guys do in their training and how they take care of themselves and the resources that are available to them. But somehow I survived that camp after that and ended up going to the American League and played a couple exhibition games and had a couple scraps with a couple veteran guys in the American League out east when our team was in Lowell, Massachusetts. And then Colorado, I don't know, somehow, I don't know if they had the blinders on or what, but they gave me an entry level free agent contract for 3 years. So that was pretty cool. It was a pretty cool moment. Bounced around their minor league team and for the most part, stuck it in the American Hockey League for those 3 years in their organization. And then kind of bounced around on a couple American League deals my last couple of years before I ended up my career in the Central Hockey League.
Yeah. Talk about that a little bit with your time with Johnny Boychuk. Obviously, we were saying, his wife sponsors the segment, and just a good guy. I'm sure you got many funny stories, but kind of his path was a very long one too to where he got to. But I just have a lot of credit because I don't want to keep going back to this, but it's just I'm super happy for you to where you are now because you totally deserve this opportunity. But there's so much perseverance that has to go through those days. That somewhat can be tough, but did you and Johnny kind of lean on each other? Was there other guys you leaned on? It seemed like you guys had a pretty close-knit group there for a while.
Yeah, like with Johnny, again, both of us were defensemen, so we spent a lot of time with each other. We're the same age. We played junior against each other. He was a very good junior defenseman. Hard to play against, big shot, and so I didn't really know him until we ended up in Lowell together. Yeah. And then obviously we're in Albany together. A little bit in Cleveland before he basically made the move to Colorado and was an NHL regular. So, Johnny's, as you know, is a happy-go-lucky individual. That's how I remember him. I haven't seen Johnny in a long, long time. But man, he played hard. I mean, he blocked shots, hit, fight, score. I mean, he did it all, especially in minor pro hockey. He found his niche to make it to the National Hockey League and win in the National Hockey League, which is hard to do. And so, we had some good times, especially off the ice as young guys being rookies together. And we had a good group of veteran players that were good to us and, really helped us along. And I, obviously I followed his career and the success he's had and watching his family grow. It's been pretty cool to watch.
Yeah, for sure. Before I toss it over to Phil, he's going to do some coaching stuff here. I'll kind of open the coaching conversation up. Was when you were playing, was always that coaching eye always kind of a thing for you? And the reason why I asked is I was listening to an interview today, and some of the people talked about the reason why maybe Connor Bedard is such a good player is because he always kind of sees the play developing before. It kind of is always kind of studying the play before. With you, was that something that it was always there for you? Is that coaching kind of tree? And then what kind of coaches that you had throughout your career? How much did your father have an influence on maybe being, I don't know if he was one of your coaches throughout your career, and who kind of, that you looked up to, and then, kind of and who gave you the first opportunity to give yourself the, the role of being maybe an assistant coach to start and then turning into a head coach?
It's a good question. I'll back it up to my upbringing. I mean, my father and my mother, the biggest things that they taught me as a young kid, whether it was academics or in sports, was just the work ethic that's involved in anything you do, and how competitive you got to be. And so that's something that kind of followed me throughout my career as a player and even as a coach. Those are values that I'd lean on for my daughter and whatnot. And, so I think that's where that kind of started. And then in terms of coaching, I mean, I've told you guys a few times on this podcast, like, I wasn't a very good player. So I found time, especially in pro hockey, where I had to find a niche, and I maybe didn't play as much as I did in junior. But I had to survive. I had to try to earn a living. And so my niche was being a good teammate, sticking up for teammates, being a good role player. But that being said, I think as my career went through the American Hockey League, you maybe sit on the bench, or you hear the coach during the game talking to the players. So you're kind of grasping that. But also in my role, I needed to be detailed. I needed to know the system. I needed to know what coach wanted everybody to do. So when I got my opportunity, it was maybe going to allot me another shift or two that period. And so I think my mind, it started to turn a little bit into, I got to be really detail oriented. I got to be really organized. I got to work extremely hard, be competitive at whatever I do. And it kind of led me into my coaching career. And as I kind of finished up, I was in the back of my mind. I still didn't, when I had to retire at 26, I had some hip ailments that wouldn't allow me to play anymore. I really didn't know what to do. I was like, I don't know what the heck I'm going to do here with hockey. Like, am I going to stay in hockey? Am I getting out of it? And was fortunate enough to, get hired by Doug Soto, who was my general manager in Everett when I was a player, and brought me on as a coach. And then, here I am today.
Phil?
Yeah, so I was just gonna ask, so like, how did that transition go? Did he approach you, or did you approach them and say, hey, this is something I'm kind of interested in doing?
Literally, Phil, I was rehabbing to try to get back to playing hockey, whether it was in the East Coast Hockey League, maybe try overseas. And, finally I kind of had a visit with the doctor in Bellevue, Washington in July of that summer, and was like, he's like, I would not advise you to continue to play. And so I was in sheer panic. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have any sort of income coming my way. I had a wife at the time, a new home. So it was sheer panic. And so, I approached the organization in Everett just because I had a relationship with management and ownership there, and the coaching staff that was there at the time. And they were in a bit of a flux moment. They had hired a new coach. The assistant coach, Jay Verity, who's now in Detroit as an assistant coach, good relationship with him. He was on his move to France to be a head coach in pro hockey over there. So there was an opening on the staff. And again, like I mentioned earlier, I was fortunate to get hired by Everett and by Doug Sotardi. He gave me an opportunity. I actually broke in as a strength and conditioning coach / assistant coach, just to kind of, give me a dual role, to get me started, and then, just kind of evolve from there.
So how many years did you spend in Everett as an assistant coach?
7 years, and four different head coaches I worked with there.
So that must have been tough, hey? So like every coach is like new systems, yeah, that'd be a tough transition every single time. So at what point as an assistant coach did you think, hey, like maybe I could transition and be a head coach of one of these teams?
Well, I'd be lying to you if I didn't say that I thought over maybe the last two head coaching decisions I made that I could have maybe stepped into that role. But, the team hired Kevin Constantine, who I played for, both in Everett for 2 years and in the American Hockey League in Houston. So I got an opportunity to work with Kevin for 4 years. And then, he had left the organization. There was a mutual parting, and he moved on to Europe. they hired Dennis Williams, who's had an unbelievable run in Everett, and obviously a world junior coach. Also a gold medal winning coach. So I had an opportunity to continue to learn from two different head coaches, along with the other two that I had, previous to them. And, I felt like over maybe that last year I was in Everett, so it was year 7, we took the team to the finals and lost to the Swift Current team. That was very, very good. And I felt like, I'm ready to, if there's an opportunity, whether I apply and reach out or somebody reaches out to me, this is what I want to do. And fortunate Saskatoon, Colin Priestner and his family reached out and had 3 great years there with that organization.
Yeah, so you become a head coach. You become a head coach in Saskatoon. What was like the workload difference? Like how did it feel going from maybe taking orders from a head coach to being the guy in charge of a team?
It was different. I was a little bit familiar with some of the guys on the staff. We had Ryan Keller, who I played against in junior. He was a carryover from the previous staff. I had an opportunity to hire a guy. I hired Ryan Marsh to come in and I had a relationship with him and his family. We were both from Quesnel, British Columbia originally. So I felt very comfortable in terms of the support I had and the work ethic I had around me, that, I could, really delegate different roles to those two coaches. But there's no doubt about it as a head coach. And I'm seeing it now, even at this level with Spencer and, being a head coach. And, you sit back in an assistant coach's chair and you're like, man, he's doing a lot of stuff right now. Like he's being tugged in different, whether they're management, media, players, trainers. It's a little different than being an assistant coach. And, so there's that goes on, but that's part of the business. And that's the people that can manage everybody the best typically is a pretty darn good coach.
Are there any moments from your time as a head coach in Saskatoon that maybe stand out, or maybe something that happened that kind of taught you a lesson or anything like that?
Probably that, my first year we had a real good team. We lost in the second round playoffs to Prince Albert, who ended up winning the Western Hockey League that year. We had some hard battles. It's a big rivalry in the Western League of Prince Albert and Saskatoon. And, there's times I had some more words in the media with Mark Hapscheid that probably didn't need to happen, but I was probably young and a little bit more immature as a coach. But I was probably also trying to sell a few tickets for the organization at the time. The moments that stick out for me were, just watching the players, and that was a team that hadn't made the playoffs in 5 years before I got there. And we were basically a playoff team for 3 years. The 1 year it happened, the other 2 were COVID cancellations, obviously. But just to kind of see the development of the players that we had there and the winning environment that we tried to implement, and they've carried that on here over the last 3 or 4 years as well. But, the year that we spent in the Regina dorms for 2 months during COVID, that was wild. I mean, I still reminisce with our staff, that we did that and the players did that. And
probably like summer camp, eh?
It was. I mean, that, as weird as it is and how awful that was of a time for our world and everything that went on, that was a weird one. That was just every other day at the rink practice, everything was going on. But it's something that I'll tell my family, my daughter, when she's older and we're sitting around having a beer, because it's,
and they won't even believe it, eh?
Exactly. And I hope it never happens again for anybody, because it was quite the experience, mentally more than anything, probably.
I have, before we get to the Stockton Heat and the Calgary Wranglers, something I don't want to really brush over is you got to be an assistant coach for Team Canada at the World Juniors twice. Who calls you and asks you, like, hey, do you want to do this, or how did that all go down?
Well, I had kind of spent 3 or 4 years in the Hockey Canada program. I did the under-17s 2 years in a row. I did an Ivan Alenka tournament in Edmonton. I believe it was 2018. And so I kind of worked my way through the program. Now, once you get to the World Junior side of things, it's a big business in Canada, as you guys know, and it's an interview process. So you basically, you're put on a short list, you fly to Toronto, and this is at that time, I'm not sure they do it anymore this way, but you fly to Toronto, you're literally in for a 2 to 3 hour interview with every commissioner in the West or in the CHL, along with the board of Hockey Canada, management that are picking the coaching staff for that. So it's a pretty intense process. I mean, you got they give you a little bit of preparation time to be ready for, and you go through that, and then they kind of assemble their staff. So, the first time I went through it, I kind of heard that Dale Hunter was going to be the head coach, so I was kind of knew I was potentially just interviewing for an assistant job. And obviously was very honored and privileged to get the call from Tom Rennie at the time that I was going to be assistant coach on the World Juniors, and we were going over to Europe. And man, that's one of the best coaching moments I've had in my career by far.
That's very special. So obviously you go to Stockton, become the head coach there. Everywhere you've been through coaching, you've had a winning record, and your record, just gets better and better. But can you talk about your time in Stockton? It's funny, I was listening. Luke Gazik was on with us not too long ago, and he actually started his own podcast, and he had Manjapani on, and they kind of were reminiscing about their time in Stockton and how interesting it was with the meetings that you guys would have to have at the start of the year with the local police and all that. But can you talk about maybe the opportunity of going there? And obviously it's a different kind of place, but it's an opportunity to kind of do something that you love, and helping teach younger players and having the veterans around you too. But can you talk about the experience it was for the year you had with the Stockton Heat?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I again, the city itself and the stuff you hear about the city of Stockton, yeah, it's a tough town. I mean, it's blue collared. It is, everybody ever.
Matt Phillips said it wasn't that bad.
It wasn't. Honestly, it wasn't. I mean, if you asked a lot of our players that season, and I think every player is going to have a different perspective on it. Yeah, we had no fans. We didn't have very good fan support. The ice conditions were awful. The boards were sometimes in, sometimes not in. I mean, there was lots of different things that you could get wrapped up with mentally that would affect you as a player or coach. But our guys were great. I mean, we had a good hockey team. We won a lot of hockey games, so it was enjoyable to come to the rink. The weather was unbelievable. It was 25, 30 degrees every day. Guys live 15, 20 minutes outside of downtown where it's a little rough and tumble. Golfed every day, went to San Francisco, went to the wine country everywhere, Napa Valley. So the guys really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. Yeah, I lived right downtown. I lived right across from the rink, so I was right in the thick of it each and every day. But I really enjoyed it, and we had a lot of fun, and we had a special group that year.
You looks like you could, and from your like penalty minutes and stuff like that, looks like you could probably handle yourself if you needed to down in Stockton, eh?
I don't know about that. So that's a different beast, man. That's a different beast.
Yeah, that's so obviously, okay, you go to Calgary, the team changes over there, and that opportunity, and like you talked about with Matthew Phillips and Dustin Wolf, the pedigree that Dustin has, and the team that you had there, and I think that, and where the progression's going, I think that obviously you're in a different place now, but I think at times still you're always going to be cheering and rooting for the guys that were there, because that's the whole goal is getting them to the next level as you got to the next level. But can you talk about the team you had there? You guys had an amazing year. You had an amazing goaltender, just a great group of players to kind of work with, a great organization to work with, and we will ask you about Chris Snow too, but a sad story, but obviously a very positive kind of person. But being around kind of that organization, and how much that meant to you.
Yeah, it was a great move in a sense that professionally, for me as a young coach to go into a Canadian market, even though kind of American Hockey League was foreign to the city, but hey, it was the Flames farm team, so everybody kind of knew the players that were coming through the system that, when they got to the rink, and our attendance over the year got greater and greater last year, just because I think the interest and whatnot of American Hockey League hockey. It's good hockey. It's good hockey to watch. And so for me personally, it was good to deal with media after every game. In Stockton, I didn't have any media. Like I talked to the coaching staff, general manager, and a few players, and that was it.
Run across the road home, and you're done.
Exactly. So it was so working in Calgary and being a part of that. Now it's no NHL type media, but we had a lot of people interested in the team and what was going on. So it was good for me to go through that and answer the tough questions and whatnot. But, we had a really tough start last year. We had a lot of turnover in the offseason from Stockton to Calgary. Obviously, you add the move into there, and guys are moving from the States up to Canada again. It's a different beast. And so we had a really tough start. Like we were, as a coaching staff, we're like, man, this might be a long year. We might lose 50 games. That was internally what we were saying to ourselves.
Yeah.
And then we kind of just started plug and playing guys, and then Wolfie started to do his thing, and we started to regain what we had last year, even though we had a totally different roster of young players and veteran guys. But we really sold the culture of what we did the year before to like what it takes to win, and our guys did an unbelievable job to win 51 games, and really we felt we were obviously one shot away in game 5 in a do or die with Coachella, who lost in the final. We felt like we had a championship type team, and just came up a little short.
Yeah. Is there some players, obviously there's the marquee names, but is there some of the guys on that team that maybe weren't often talked about, and media wasn't often talking about them, podcasts maybe that aren't often talking about them? Because I feel like you really had a really good group once the groove kind of got better. I do remember it kind of being a bit rocky, but I just, from believing in what, the coaching style that you have and the mindset you have and the people you surrounded yourself with, it for me, I didn't have any kind of worry. I thought it was gonna get there, but it is hard moving from one city to another. Anyone, that's a tough transition.
Yeah, we had a couple veterans that came over that signed new contracts headed into Calgary last summer. So they understood a little bit of me, our staff, in terms of the expectation, whether it's practice or our workouts or our meeting sessions or preparation, whatever it was. So I think they were really good at bringing, the new veterans in, or the players vying for spots on our team last year. Nick DeSimone is one guy that really sticks out for me, who's still with the Flames and playing at Edmonton tonight. And he's an unbelievable story. He played his first NHL game last year at I believe he's 28 or 29 years old now. But he was very deserving of that because he's been a good soldier for the Flames organization. And they're young players that came through and the 2 years he's been there. He's one. I mean, Clark Bishop was another guy. Brett Sutter. I mean, he was outstanding for us last year as a captain. Just an old school through and through. Guys really respected him. Over 1,000 games in the American Hockey League. That's hard to do. I don't care who you are. He was outstanding. You had Phillips. I know I'm missing guys, but we had a really good blend of young players that brought a lot of energy and juice each and every day. And then, our veteran guys, they dug in. They're high character players and wanted to do well.
Yeah. Phil, you have anything there or transition over the Caps?
Yeah, no. So like let's talk about like Matthew Phillips. So like he goes up to the Flames for, I think he was up there for about a month. Did you guys like notice, obviously, like he was missing for a month? Like, are you sitting there as a coach being like, okay, give me this kid back if he's not going to play?
Well, definitely when I was sitting watching games on my couch having a beer, and they're on the road somewhere and he wasn't playing, I was kind of like, well, hey, you can kick him back if you want, and you just call him up tomorrow if you need him to play the next game. But hey, that wasn't my call. It was above my pay grade. Because again, you want guys to get called up. You want them to have success when they get called up. You want them to play when they get called up because it's important to their development, especially as a young player. But we did have a lot of guys that got a call last year, whether they played 1 game or 5 games or 10 games, 20 games. We had a lot of guys get called up. And I think that was a big reason the team moved to Calgary from Stockton, was just that, the organization under one roof. And and just more visuals for management and whatnot of the player.
Yeah.
But that's the beast, So that's, you lose guys, injury or call ups, and
Well,
you
and
just
I guess
plug and play.
Yeah.
that's the tough part about probably like running an AHL team is like the greater cause was the Calgary Flames, right? Like that was the main team, and you guys are a direct flow through that team. So if they need a guy, I guess you don't really have a say, right? So
Yeah, I was, and I'll be honest, it was tough at times as a coach. I mean, like the big thing, and I think every organization is a little different in terms of their philosophy with young players and the development component, is balancing developing and winning. And then for me, they're twofold. I mean, if you want your young players to understand what it takes to win, they got to learn it in the American Hockey League, and there's going to be times where they need to take a day off and watch from up top and see, that the finer things or the little things in a hockey game that we've talked about, they need to be executed at some point. And so it was a balancing act. It's a great league to coach in. It's a great league to be a part of. But it was challenging at times because I wanted to, maybe play a veteran player, and young players got to stay in there, and you understand as a coach, but I'm a competitive guy. I wanted to win. I wanted us to have success. I owe it to 25 guys, not just one sometimes, right?
yeah,
That's
absolutely.
my mentality. But it's part of the business, and every organization has a different philosophy on it.
Can you talk about the now transition over to the Caps here? Before we get you out, is and I'm a Leaf fan, so full disclosure, I saw Spencer Carberry in Toronto last year. So and one thing I loved it. Like, I'm married to this game. I don't have a significant other, I don't have kids. My marriage and my life is to hockey. I love, like, this podcast is my life, and connecting with people like you is, means a lot, and connecting to the game and watching it, and studying, because I think years ago, a coach like Spencer Carby, maybe he did get the opportunity, but maybe he only gets like a 2-year deal. And the fact that he got a 4-year deal, I think, meant a lot. And when I talked to Elliot Friedman last week about having you on, he goes, Mitch Love is today's coach. He's today's coach in the NHL. Same with Spencer. How did that process come up about for you, and going over to the Washington Capitals? I know personally it was hard for me to see you leave the Flames organization, because, again, I'm not standing here and I'm not alive today if it wasn't for the people in that organization. Anyone that knows my story is Peter Hanlon, and guys like Travis Hamonic and Michael Backlund and Brad Treliving have done a lot for me with my mental health and things that I've gone through. But I'm super happy that you got the opportunity to get to where you rightfully deserve, and that's in the NHL and the here and now. But how important in that relationship maybe you had with Spencer, and how that phone call kind of came about?
Yeah, and it's just to backpedal a little bit here, Josh. Like those people you just mentioned, like Brad Treliving and Brad Pascal, those guys, I have a lot of respect for in terms of the opportunity they gave me to get into pro hockey. They took a flyer on me. I had 3 years of call it that, of head coaching experience in the Western Hockey League, and I'm running their American Hockey League team. So I owe them a lot as well. So I'm glad you brought those guys' names up, and wish them nothing but the best where they're at in Toronto, and obviously in Calgary still. But the Washington thing, again, it was from the time we finished May 20th and with the Wranglers to, let's call it, June 22nd, I had a couple interviews with the Flames for the head coaching position. Great experience for me as a coach, a young coach, to go through, getting grilled on each end in terms of, trying to be a head coach in the National Hockey League. So it's something I really will learn moving forward if I get another opportunity in doing so. And then, obviously they went in a different direction with Ryan Huska, who's a very good coach and has paid his dues in that organization, no doubt about that. And honestly, the first phone call I got when that was kind of like, okay, I'm a free agent, or I'm coming back to Calgary to coach the Wranglers, was Spencer. And I don't know. I didn't know Spencer that well. I mean, we spent time talking about players when I was in Everett as an assistant coach, and he was in South Carolina. And he was calling on recruiting, overage players to go play in the coast. And then, fast forward 5-6 years, we ran into each other in Calgary at a coaches conference with Hockey Canada, because he at the time was in Saginaw in the OHL and whatnot. So we didn't have a lot of dealings, and obviously I followed his path. I got a ton of respect of what he's done as a young coach, and the path he's taken. It's unbelievable to get where he's gotten to, and then we both share the same agency, so I think there's a little bit of a connection there. And in terms of Gil Scott kind of putting us in touch with each other, and we just hit it off. I mean, there's a lot of similarities when now I work with Spencer, day after day. There's a lot of similarities to our personalities, and our philosophies as coaches and whatnot. He's probably just a little bit more polished than me right now. And that's probably the 2 years of being in the National Hockey League and working under Sheldon in a crazy hockey market.
Yeah.
But man, he's a smart dude. He's a smart guy. He's organized. He's detailed. I'm learning a ton, and from our assistant coach, Kirk Muller's been around too. He's been doing this thing. Whether he's a player or coach, he's been a head coach in NHL. Scotty Allen's been coaching for 26 years. Kenny McCudden, who's a skills coach / assistant coach for us, was in Columbus for 8 years. These guys are, for me, I'm being a sponge right now as a young coach, learning from them and the day-to-day life in the National Hockey League as a coach.
That's awesome. Before I toss it back over to Phil, listening to the experts and all the guys around the game, and they and very well said by you there too. But let's talk about the team that you have right now in front of you and the season that it's ahead. I'm kind of getting a little tired of people talking. They're just getting the 73 goals to OV's record, and that's all it's about. I do think you guys have a good team, a team that can compete for the Stanley Cup. There are some very important players that missed the season last year due to injury, and guys like John Carlson and others. But can you talk about what you're seeing so far in front of you and how excited you are for the season to start next week?
Yeah, I'm seeing a very motivated group. A team that is pissed off about not making the playoffs last year.
Yeah.
I think the lengthier off season is helped these guys physically and mentally. This team's played a lot of hockey for a long time, and some of those guys needed a little bit of an extra breather. Knock on wood, we're healthy right now. And guys have been unbelievable. Their practice habits have been great. They're being open to different changes with our staff and some systems and whatnot. And they're hungry, and they've won. I mean, they know what it takes, and they're bringing some of our young players into the mix now, and some guys that we've signed in the offseason that are going to have to help contribute to this team. And we're going to need everybody. We're going to need guys to step up, and we're going to need guys to have careers and stay healthy and whatnot. But it's a very motivated group. And honestly, Josh, they're unbelievable guys. They're true pros. They work, like I mentioned, extremely hard in practice, always asking how your family, whatever. Like they're just salt of the earth people. And it's been a lot of fun to get to know them, because I grew up watching these guys play as a young coach when they were kind of younger themselves. So
yeah,
here we are. Now I'm kind of trying to help them along as a coach here, but it's a fun group to go to the rink with each and every day right now.
Yeah, Jason Chimera is a friend of the pod, and many years in that locker room with a lot of those leaders there, and he's always said very highly things about the guys like Ovi and Backstrom and many others, and Tom Wilson. But so it's a great group. We're going to be cheering for you here for sure. Phil, I know you got 2 more questions to close out, so I'll toss it back to you to close it out here.
Yeah, just a couple things here really quick. So how cool is it? So we'll go back to Matthew Phillips for a minute here, since you know him pretty well. How cool was it to have him come over to Washington too at the same time? And how did that conversation go when that was all done and you were both there?
Yeah, I mean, I talked to Matt a little bit prior to free agency. It just, I wasn't even hired by anybody at the time other than working for the Wranglers, and just was kind of asking him, hey, like, where's your mind at? I'm sure he was asked 100 times, whether it was by the Flames or people around the city. And he's all business, this guy, so he was kind of very coy about everything. Um, and I knew there was going to be heavy interest, as there should be. I mean, he's been unbelievable the last couple of years, and he's a great pro. He's good with the younger players. He works his ass off each and every day in practice, and he's a competitive guy that wants to win. So those guys are going to get paid in pro hockey now.
Yes.
Whether you're in the American Hockey League or the NHL, those guys get paid, and so he got everything he deserved by getting an NHL one-way contract. I know when July 1 hit here, it was 12:01 or 12:02, and Spencer was calling him. And, the organization, I was only on the job for about 10 days where they were asking me about him. And I gave him my opinion and my experiences with him, what I thought he could do. And I've been a lot quieter now over the last couple of weeks with training camp. I'm letting them form their own opinions of him as a player and a person. But now we're getting down the short strokes here, and they're seeing a lot of the things that I've seen for 2 years, and it's a cool story, and I hope he can continue to finish this and be an everyday NHL player, and because he really does deserve it. I wouldn't say he's an underdog story, because he's just a good person and a good hockey player, and he puts a lot of time, and he's so determined that he deserves what he gets.
That's very true.
Yeah, we're rooting for him big time here, and so I asked him today if he had anything on you, and he just said you were coaching against him in junior when you guys beat them in 5 overtimes.
Yeah.
He said maybe you got a story about that night.
Man, that was wild. Unbelievable series. They had a great team. Victoria, when Matthew was there for those years, they had really good teams. Well coached. Dave Lowry was there. So it was a battle. We had, Kevin Constantine coach team, very structured, organized, detailed, whatnot. But yeah, it was unbelievable. I mean, longest game in CHL history. That's kind of cool to be a part of. But man, after a while, you get into that third, fourth, fifth overtime. You're just rolling. You're just trying to find 2 defensemen. I was running at the time, like, just who's freshest to go back out there. And it was just it was the mind that was going to let go of the game. And I remember as clear as day, it was kind of the parting of the seas by the Victoria defenseman. One guy went down the wall, the other guy stayed on the weak side. Shot got blocked, and there was just a clear lane up the gut. The weak side defenseman should have been the middle part of the ice. It wouldn't have been a breakaway.
Yeah.
And then a cool story was Cal Babbage, a guy that we called up from Junior A at the end of his Junior A season as an AP call up, and scored a historic goal as sticks in the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto. So that was a fun night. Obviously it was. If we lost, it wouldn't have been a fun night.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you'll have to ask Matt if he's still a little bitter tomorrow when you see him. Hey,
I will.
that he brought that up. So okay, that's it for me. We'll let Bosco close us out here.
Yeah, so obviously earlier we talked about Chris Snow. I don't know if you had any dealings with him during your time, but if you did, maybe if you can share. But just kind of the legacy that he's going to leave behind here, and the hockey community will mourn the loss, but also celebrate the great life that he had.
Yeah, obviously tragic. I mean, it's over the last couple of years, I've got to know Chris better. I first met Chris when I was playing in the Houston, Minnesota organization. He was working for the Wild in a capacity there. And then fast forward, whatever, it's been 15 years later, I'm coaching in the same organization that he's the assistant general manager in. And so if you ask anybody in the world that's met Chris Snow, and you know this, Josh, like this guy's salt of the earth family man. This guy is salt of the earth human being to everybody. What he and his family had to endure over the last 4 years in terms of that disease and the battle he put up, I don't think anybody's surprised that he went through that and kept battling. just because of just the person he is. And I really feel for him, it's obviously his wife, Kelsey, and the 2 kids.
Yeah.
Got to know them a little bit here last year. But a great man, and the legacy he's left behind in terms of the perseverance and resiliency of what he had to deal with in his family. I know that organization will be playing for Chris Snow this year.
Yeah, they definitely will be. And very nice words. One of the things we do ask towards the end, and if you want, it can go to this too, but we always do a donation at the end for the guests that we have on. And I don't know if there's any charities that you work with that you can maybe plug, and we like to kind of give back, and that's kind of what our whole podcast is about. So is there any charities that you work with, during your time in Calgary or in British Columbia being there?
I'll leave that up to you, Josh. The only thing I'm really a big pro at in terms of it's near and dear to my heart is mental health. So whatever association that you guys are familiar with, whether it's locally, Calgary, whatever, I'll leave that up to you, and I can talk about that offline.
Yeah.
But I've had some close friends that have really dealt with a lot of mental health. I think it's a real thing. It's a real thing, and that's really important to me.
Yeah, it is. We just had Ron McLean and Kelly Rudy on last month. Is obviously Suicide Prevention Month, the month of September, and we had a full hour of that. So we'll definitely have a conversation about that offline here. But Mitch, all the best to you this year. Continued success. Wishing you and your girlfriend and your entire family the best of luck. God bless you, and take care, and we'll definitely keep in touch. And when you make your way to Alberta here, maybe if you have time, there's a steak dinner that we can take you out on and kind of catch up that way. But thanks for your time tonight. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. It's been a pleasure, and great to chat hockey and life with you, and all the best to you guys. Thank you.